Welcome to Shane East Meets, which is a special series from the Audiobook Lovin Podcast, where I, Shane East, get to meet some of your favourite people from the romance arena of audiobooks. We hope you love this episode, and of course, the Audiobook Lovin Podcast is brought to you by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. Hello, Louise. It's lovely to have you here on my first ever Shane East Meets.
I'm totally honoured. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I'm going to address a couple of elephants in the room, first off. First one was, and something you have agreed with me on when we chatted, is I sometimes sound in these off-work moments when I'm just chit-chatting a little bit drunk.
I don't think I said that, did I?
You did on a WhatsApp. You said,
Yeah.
a little bit. So I don't know what that is, and I don't know if it's just I get excited and I start laughing and then it all sort of mixes into one.
It's worse. Yeah, you could sound worse, couldn't you?
Then I've had a couple of cocktails already at 12
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yeah, nice.
So. It's just such a contrast, because considering I do voice for a living, when I've heard it recently, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And there's an Aussie twang in there every now and then.
Well, that's the London thing, isn't it? Because the Australian accent is based on the London accent. I think. Yeah, because all the convicts came over from London, didn't they?
All the convicts. If there's any Australians listening, I apologise to bring that sordid past up. It's true. I thought it was because, well, I think I said to you as well, I had some, in London, people would say, where are you from? Like they would ask me, and I was like, how dare you? I take offence. And some people thought it was
Before you
Australia.
moved to America?
Yeah, before I'd even been here. Which makes, so maybe you're onto something. I have to have a look at that. But I thought it was because I had Aussie friends in London, and I was like, oh, they're just rubbing off on me.
Probably more.
I don't know, or it's the convict story that you kind of brought up. But anyway, so that elephant. So for anyone listening, if I sound a little bit tipsy, I'm not. I think I just get excited. When I don't have to articulate for work, I obviously just throw the cat out of the window, just whatever. And the other elephant is what's your issue? Not issue. That makes it sound very serious.
Issue. How long have we got?
What is your, I don't know how to put it, thing with regional accents? Do you know what I'm talking about?
What, that I don't generally my characters don't normally have them.
Yes, because for those who don't know, so when you send over a book, you send over a sort of cast list of main characters and some tertiary ones, and it normally explains a little bit about them, which is very helpful for us narrators. But I think you're the only person I've had who said no regional accents written across the top.
The cat's out the bag. What are you saying? Why are you telling people this? No, I tell you. Well, one, because if I don't tell you, you do go off on a frolic of your own. You do like to add some in, don't you?
I do. I do. Why can't he be a northerner, or why can't he be from Glasgow? I don't understand.
And I think generally because it's just easier to listen to if they don't have a regional accent, and then because I'm such a pedant, if the accent's there in one sentence and not in another, I'm going to put that in a correction and go, your accent was stronger here, and you need to make it consistent, and then you're going to hate me. And so it's just easier not to have any. And also for Americans listening, I think it's just an easier listen with no regional accent. So yeah. It's not I'm not meaning to cause offence. I'm just trying to say let's keep it simple.
Okay. Yeah, no, I always, well, because I've used them because it used to help me. Yours, romance isn't so much because there's generally the main characters and then some friends and then maybe a few randoms. But when I used to do more, or when I do more of those like murder mysteries, when there's like 30 or 40 people, I found it very handy to have a bunch of different accents up my sleeve. And then it just became a habit, and I was like, well, why not? But no, I was always curious with you and the regional accents. But I'm glad we've cleared
There's no conspiracy.
You don't hate Northerners. We love them. Love them.
Exactly.
Now, we met for the first time at Rare in
We did.
in London, yeah, which was lovely. And I've already talked about my takeaway from it with Viviana the other week. But I wanted to ask you your takeaway from that whole experience. Obviously, you've done a bunch of them, but I was curious.
Well, I've done my first signing is actually in the US this year as well. So I did Book Bonanza, and I did a Copa in New York, and then obviously did Rare, and so I did 3 in really quick succession. And the takeaway really is always just how amazing it is. I'm always absolutely flabbergasted about, that's a really British word probably, isn't it? Flabbergasted.
I love that word.
About how many people come up and really just want to support you, and are really, and what's nice is that I see people that I've been seeing since my first ever signing, that have been reading me since way back, when I first started, and how they kept with me, I don't know, because those first couple of books, I don't know, they weren't the best. So, but they stuck with me, and it's just great. And it's such a high to see all these people and get to chat with them. I just really enjoy it. I really enjoy the day.
Yeah. Well, I think I said to you at the time, I was like, there's a lot of love in the room. And I've said that a bunch of times since, which really took me by surprise.
Yeah, there was a lot of love for you, wasn't there?
There was a lot. No, there was a lot of love in general. And I mean, not that I expected it to not be like that, but I just was really people really just love the authors, and they love the work, and they love the characters, and they're really excited about it. And I was
yeah, it's really positive, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the key thing, is it's just relentlessly positive, when there can be a lot of negativity, not just in, we've got drama going on a worldwide level, but also like in our day-to-day lives. So that's just a nice escape for the day. And I think that's probably why people enjoy coming to them. That's why authors enjoy doing them, I think.
Yeah, if you're in a shitty moment in life, then pop to one of those signings. Is my advice, because you do walk out with a smile on your face. I do.
Exactly.
But on that theme though, is there, since you did the US and you did the one in the UK in London, is there a difference with the sort of American readers, listeners versus the ones at Rare, which was predominantly UK based people, I think?
Yeah, well, although lots of people from Denmark and Germany at Rare actually, but yeah, the main difference is everyone thinks I'm whispering. So
in America.
Yeah, they're like, I'm sorry. And they all think I'm very formal. So
you are. Yeah.
Which is quite weird. All I'm saying is, hi, how are you? How are you getting on? And they're like, oh, Louise, that's very formal. That's what the feedback I'm getting from my assistant. You're being very formal. I'm like, oh, okay. That's not, I mean, maybe it is in the UK, no one's telling me, but I don't think so.
No, go on.
And it's just, so it's louder, I would say, which you maybe expect a British person to say about an American signing. So so everyone's, I have to repeat myself a lot because people can't hear me. That's the main takeaway for me. So I end up shouting what I feel like I'm shouting. So it's
hello.
It is. It's a bit of a disaster, really. I need to go next time. I'll go maybe mic'd up, and it'll be easier.
You'll have one of those things that they use at the gym class. No, I think that's an interesting situation, because when I first moved to America from London, I had that all the time. It was exhausting, whether I was in Starbucks or whether I was making new friends or whatever. There was a lot of, what? Sorry? Because they thought I was mumbling. And I just thought I was speaking at a very kind of nice, moderate pace and tone. But no one had a clue what I was saying. And so I've I've learned to I think now I speak just generally louder than I ever used to, and it seems quite normal to me.
So I bet your UK friends hate you when you come back. You're like, oh, the loud one's coming back.
Like obnoxious thinks he's so
Yeah.
great. But I did notice that a lot. Yeah, with just the difference in how people speak. And when I made friends here, I literally for the first year, I was just like, I give up. Like I'm making all these funny little one-liners and no one's even hearing
No one's appreciating me.
because I like these people, but fucking hell, this is driving me mad. Because they just wouldn't hear me because they had such a louder way of speaking that my little sort of quips here and there just went by the wayside. So yeah, I think that's a definite thing, and I learned to just shout really and raise my voice.
It's not very profound. Were you hoping for a profound answer from me about the difference between the American and UK signing?
Well, no, I think along those lines, I felt the same in the UK. I found because I did a small one here recently, and it was very small in comparison to Regs. That's like a monster. That's humongous. But yeah, the obviously American culture, like people are just much more outgoing from the get-go. I feel like like, hey, how's it going, and oh my god. Whereas I noticed in the UK, in London, people would sort of crab shuffle up to me maybe sometimes,
Yeah.
and very
It's
sweetly.
sweet, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. There's like a shyness to it, and there's sort of, and would you mind possibly if you could sign this? I know it's an imposition, but I'd really like you to. So I had a bunch of that. Except your fan friend Leslie.
Leslie, bless her. Did you get away with all your clothing intact there?
She did tell me she wanted to pinch my bum, which she certainly wasn't shy.
No one could accuse Leslie, but she's she's a dancer. She's like danced with all the big pop stars and stuff. So she's used to Americans, I think. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, some Brits are cheeky. They've got that cheeky. There's just, I just don't think we're born with it. I don't think it's inbred. But yeah, Leslie, I was going to ask you about Leslie, if she's doing well.
She actually whispered some very, very exciting news, which I'm probably not allowed to say anything, but she's you'll hear about Leslie. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, good. All right. Look out for Leslie. Does she have a last name that we should look out for?
She does, but I can't pronounce it. Because I only see it on Facebook. So that's the thing. I wish everybody came to signings with their full name and their avatar, because then I would recognize them from Facebook. So it's so I could spell it for you. Well, I'm not going to in case I get it wrong, but I can't pronounce it.
Leslie of the last name that we can't pronounce. Yeah, I look forward to hearing more about Leslie. Maybe next time we chat, you can fill me in if it's public.
I will.
But I was that also on that note. I noticed, because I spent the most amount of time at your table. I bopped around a few.
Good. That's what I like to hear.
It was it was very nice. I had a lot of fun at your table. And I noticed, I felt like you have a very quite chummy relationship with a lot of your readers. And I wondered how that worked.
Well, I think being a Brit and then them being British mainly, I think that gives you, because there are loads of us, but there aren't. I've been around for quite a while compared to a lot of people that go to those signings, and I think I've been seeing those people since I suppose 2015 was my first signing, so it's not like ages, but and I just have, you build up a relationship. There is a kind of a British banter. I think that you can get quite comfortable with people quite quickly if you can strike up that chemistry with somebody. So I think there's that, and I guess, I don't know, I see the same faces again. It's really great to see them. I'm really grateful for their support, and it's really nice that they come out, and even though they saw me last year, they come back to the table and wait in the queue. It's really, it's really gratifying, really humbling to see that. So, and I love, some of them are so funny, and they tell me such horrendously personal things about them. It's like we're like best mates, so it's nice.
It is it's an interesting relationship you end up building with people. I've kind of, on a much smaller scale than you, have experienced some of that over Twitter and stuff.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, it's you can see the best or worst of people on social media, can't you? And you can choose to surround yourself by the ones that are giving out their best rather than their worst. So I think that's what I try and do.
Yes, yeah. Well, I haven't come across, in the romance genre, I haven't come across too many people. Actually, don't think I've come across anyone really who's been particularly negative.
No, I was thinking non-romancy. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I got called a poor man's Sean Bean once outside
It could be worse.
That's what I thought. I nearly replied to the bugger. I was like, oh, thanks. That's actually a great compliment. I'll take it. And I was like, oh, how dare you? And I wanted to ask your thoughts, because I made a joke about this with Viviana when I was saying that I don't know how many people actually knew who I was at your table. I know some did, because I'd met them earlier in the day, and you don't forget a Leslie. There was who was it? Yeah, some of them I wondered, because you were very gracious and you would pass them on and say, oh, would you like Shane to sign? And then I would sometimes look in their eyes and I thought, I don't think she knows who I am, this lady.
Sure.
she's not done audiobooks, and she's just saying yes because you've asked her to. So I was curious what you thought on that.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like audio listeners are crazy for narrators. Like they are much more so, I think, than the authors. Really, they follow the narrators more than they follow authors. And I know, as an audio listener, I will find a narrator I like and I'll listen to everything they narrate. But the difference is, and I suppose it is similar for me because I don't show my face on social media, that the narrators generally don't have their face on social media. And so, Andy's an exception, obviously, and there are exceptions, but so your face isn't really on social media, so they're not going to know who you are. So that, I think in a way it increases the mystery and can be quite nice, and so people maybe even get whipped up into more of a frenzy. But at the same time, it means if you're sitting next to me, maybe my dog walk. I don't know. But I think it's just about not being on social media. I quite like that because it meant, I went through the big hotel at Book Bonanza and no one bothered me because nobody knew who I was. Whereas Jessica Hawkins walks through the hotel in Book Bonanza and literally she can't get 2 paces without someone stopping her because she's all over social media. So it's just, I think it's more to do with the fact whether or not your face is out there or not.
Yeah. Mine's 50. I've taken a bunch of pictures now, but on my actual profiles, my avatars and things, there's sort of always an occluded face, half something. So I'm kind of yes, no out there, I guess.
You should really put your Halloween costume picture on.
I know. I think that's fucking great. I may put that out on Thursday on actual Halloween. We'll see what people think. And then I meant to ask you, I've never realized, how did you and I start working together? Because from my end, you just sort of popped out of the woodwork from Andy, from her company.
Well, because I had, I was looking for, I'm trying to think what was the first book. It must have been Promised Nights, was it? With
wow.
You'll remember. No.
I do know that name, but it's a long time ago.
Yeah, and it's actually, I've done that recently, so it won't be that one that we worked on first. I think it would be maybe Duke of Manhattan.
Yeah.
So, and I needed and I'd previously used Sebastian mainly. I'd say almost all for all my heroes were American, and then I'd written a UK hero and needed a voice, and so was trawling through the narrators as all authors do, I think, on Audible, and came across you as Ethan Blackstone. So I think when I used to write my like character list would always be like Ethan Blackstone, please, because it was perfect for me. That's exactly the hero I was going for. And so yeah, I asked Andy to put us in contact.
Oh yeah.
So that's how I found you.
That's how. Yeah, I remember now when thinking of it, because I remember on your notes the Ethan Blackstone thing, because you didn't want him, no regionals and not too posh. Those are the two things I always remember about you. Like, not too posh, even if he's supposed to be like a duke kind of, or like well-to-do. It's like, don't make him too posh. And I was like, I get that, because I don't think it's as sexy.
Well, some people like it, don't they? But I don't. I mean, I just think it's not very. Oh, I don't know. I've got a funny thing about what's attractive in a guy, and being too posh is a bit like. I could say a number of things that could offend now, so I won't. But it's not attractive from my perspective. So, and also it's less and less the case that you hear very, very plummy accents in the UK. So even if you listen to like Will and Harry, they are posh, but they're not as posh as they would have been a generation ago. You know, they're not the way Diana spoke, for example.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I've had to think about that doing this job, where I was like, I agree with you. And I think maybe that's just a Britishism, because I think growing up in London, if you spoke too well-to-do, it wasn't considered, sexy. It was all a bit rah, 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 and aren't you posh? So there's a bit of classism going on between sort of maybe myself, which was lower, if you're going back in hierarchy, lower class, more working class family, and sort of, that sort of divide there, where it just wasn't considered that great. But I don't know if Americans feel the same, because I do find some comments on things, and they just love the accent, and then I listen to that accent, I think, God, that sounds very, I don't know, what, like Hugh Grant at his most sort of posh and well-to-do. But each to their own.
Exactly. And I think what we hear is different to what Americans hear, right? It's the same the other way, because sometimes I'll be able to pick up regional accents in the US, but sometimes I just won't. I just don't hear it, you know?
Yeah. But just to go back on that point, I've definitely, ever since your comments anyway, I always kind of, even when I had a posh one, because I did Emma Chase's stuff, and those are all royals. And I thought the same as you. I kind of looked up Will and Harry, and I was like, they're not like typically, heightened RP posh, like, like,
No.
and like Charles and all of that. It's like, it's a bit more down to earth sort of way of speaking, which I agree. I kind of think sounds a bit more, if you're going to be a bit rough and tumble and you've got to do sex scenes. I just can't do a sex scene talking in a super posh voice.
Too funny, yeah. No, that'd be just weird.
It wouldn't work for me. Now, you asked me a question at Rare, when you said, do I read all the girl parts?
Yeah.
And I said, you said
You
I
laugh.
lied.
You try to muddy the waters a little, not answer, I think.
I don't know what came out of my mouth the first time around, but I clarified that I do skim the girl parts, and generally, mainly because of time constraints, will then just ask the girl, like, about certain things that might have been more highlighted in their sections, and then go from there. But then I did wonder what you thought we actually did do, what you thought our process on this end was.
Yeah, and I obviously would like to think that you're so enthralled by the book that you've got to read the girl part. But being a realist, thought that maybe that would be too time consuming on the basis you're doing a lot of these. So I'm sure that you get pulled into a story every now and then and you just have to read. But generally, I would have thought, I think I guessed that you didn't. But what I didn't guess is that you would contact the female narrator and ask questions. I didn't realise you were doing that.
Right. To me, that's the imperative bit that I then kind of because I'll have my own notes about who's who, and I'll have your notes or author's notes, and then if there's gaps missing in my knowledge, then I'll go. Well, I just always kind of confer, and then we swap voices and stuff to make sure that we're at least in a ballpark, so we don't, sound completely different, even though we are a man and a woman trying to do the same characters, which is a bit odd. But
Nice.
works.
And it's what's weird is that you get some narrators, like I'll hear from you a few times during a recording, sometimes more if I've made too many typos. But then with Saskia, for example, I'll never hear from her, just never. And then with Sebastian, I used to hear from him when I used him. With Andy, not very much, but then she'll send me all her typos afterwards. But do you know what I mean? It's really interesting, the process that you go through from our perspective, because we just don't see that at all. We just get the finished product, as it were. And you talk to me about your prep. I've got to do my prep, so send me the manuscript now. And I'm like, what prep are you doing? This is terrifying. It feels like I'm going to get marked on things.
I mean, people have their own systems. I've realized different narrators, like really good narrators, all do it all slightly differently. And I think I'm a bit old school, and I like to mark up a lot of things because it really helps me get into it. Because there's, on a page, even in a paragraph, there's different beats and stuff. So maybe I just don't have the skill to do that on the fly. I have to have it marked in. I think it's just how I learned to do it, and then I've kind of stuck with it. And I've tried to. Some books I've not done it or not had the time to do it, and I prefer to do it. So if I can, then that's why I hassle you for a final manuscript.
It's okay. I don't mind. I like the fact that you're invested.
Yeah, I just don't want to sound like a knob. That's I guess it's pride. Then the other thing, that was what we also talked about. This so rare, but I wanted to ask you how you write from the male perspective. And you did explain it to me in person, but I don't have that on tape.
Yeah, so I mean, it can be different things, and each character is different. So sometimes you've got an idea of someone who's got the same kind of temperament, maybe from a character in a TV show or a film or a book. And then sometimes it's somebody and sometimes it's just not at all any of those things, or it's a combination of all those things. But generally, I have worked, as a lawyer for a long time, worked in a very male-dominated environment for a number of years. So kind of I'm very used to that. Very used to being surrounded by these suits and by these guys who obviously aren't as attractive or commanding or,
people from your past listening to this saying, how dare you?
No, they're probably all going, yeah, true. No, but it's interesting, all the guys who I've known from, who knew me before I started writing, all assume that I'm writing about them. They all go, oh, so is there anything about me that you use? They all assume that. I'm like, yeah. And it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. There's only ever been one woman that said, am I a character inspiration for you? But
that's classic male ego, I think, isn't it? Like, it's all about us, obviously. The little lady's talking about me.
I know, exactly. I've always had a secret fantasy about you that I've put into a book. For sure. So it's just generally, being surrounded by, people of a similar kind of profession, or I don't know. Then none of them are as amazing as the characters you're going to write. Otherwise, you wouldn't write them. But it's just being surrounded by those people, I guess. And I, have a lot of guy friends, and I chat to them, and I often will ask them questions that, well, why would you say this? And why, what would you think if a woman did this to you? And I drive them by doing that. Would you think she was crazy if this happened? Kind of thing. In fiction, isn't it?
Yeah. It's interesting because obviously I think we discussed, men and women do obviously think and speak differently, and I've always found your writing very, very good on that front, like very believable for me to, even when it's very emotional, like men kind of, uh, I mean, we are emotional too. And I believe it. Like when I read your stuff, but internal thoughts and things like that. I like it. So that's why I was always
Hmm.
curious.
I'm going
Uh,
to take that as a compliment.
yes, yeah. It is because it is. It's interesting because I think, I don't know from a writer's point of view, but from recording it, I'm not writing the words of the female characters, but I have to make them sound, believable. So the listener can lose themselves in those, in me pretending to be, Sarah or whoever I am. You know what I mean? So it's kind of just an interesting divide of like how you kind of
Yeah, that's interesting. That you have to basically be a woman and a man, don't you? That was meant to sound slightly more profound than it did, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that, love. You have to be a man. It sounds like something your parents would say. You'd be like, oh, like he pretends to be a man and a woman. That's what he does for a living. And then the neighbors are like, what? Actually,
The one that moved to LA, that one.
I don't think my folks don't know about the romance so much. They ask me
Don't
like,
they?
no, not that I wouldn't tell them, but that they just, I don't know, they're just very English. They're like, oh, how's work? I'm like, oh, it's good, yeah, busy. Just like doing a bunch of books, done some promos, done some this and video. Go, oh, no, lovely. As long as you're having a nice time, is my mum's phrase. Bless her. And then we move on.
But also in the UK, we don't really accept that we read romance. We don't have the genre. We don't call it romance. We call it chick lit, really. And romance is seen as kind of very much the kind of Harlequin-esque kind of books. The stuff I write really is seen as chick lit, I think.
Right.
So I think it's harder to explain in the UK that you write romance, because I always say, oh, I write kind of romancy chick lit, and I go, oh, chick lit, okay. Or I say holiday beach reads, something like, oh, okay.
Because I like really that one, holiday beach reads. I'm going to use that. Put that on a card.
Yeah, so it is more difficult in the UK to explain it. In the US, it's much more, it's the biggest selling genre, and
wow. Well, I think like historically, I'd say, growing up, we had, for American listeners, we had Barbara Cartland.
Yeah, exactly.
Was romance. who was a lovely older lady.
Yeah, I aspire to be Barbara Cartland and lie back on my sofa dictating all my books while someone feeds me grapes and I pet like a chihuahua or something.
Yeah, for anyone listening who doesn't know who she is, just Google Barbara Cartland, and you'll see it. So there's lots of pink, I feel, lots of flowy fabrics and big white hair is what I remember.
Literally me in like 30 years.
She was the sort of doyen of romance, right? Like that was what, if you said romance, it was sort of Barbara Cartland, or maybe, like you said, Harlequin, sort of old school dukes and ladies, or else there was Jackie Collins.
Well, Jackie Collins was she wasn't romance. She was
naughty.
Buster.
She was what?
Bunkbusters. A bunkbuster, she was.
Bonkbuster.
Yeah, instead of blockbuster, you'd have bunkbuster. So Jackie Collins and then Judith Krantz, and I loved all those books. I absolutely, instead of studying for my A levels, I read all those books like constantly.
Jilly Cooper.
I never liked her because that was all very posh, wasn't it? And Jilly Cooper's very posh.
Sorry, Jilly, if you're listening. I don't know. I never read any of. I actually, my mum had them. That's why I laugh, because my mum had some Jackie Collins. She had the old Bonkbuster. Shamelessly on the bookshelf.
It was totally acceptable.
Right.
So you should give her some audiobooks that you've narrated. That wouldn't be awkward at all.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Have a listen to this. Let's talk about it on Boxing Day. Yeah, I think my Christmas is very bizarre. But see, I always equated contemporary romance to more Jackie Collins and I don't know Jenny Cooper, but I did read a bit of one of Mum's Jackie Collins when I was sort of younger and curious, and I was like, oh,
You
what
learnt a
mums
lot,
do.
didn't you?
I did. I was like, Mum. But I always equated them to that. But you're saying they're not really that, because you're definitely not bonkbusters. Yours aren't bonkbusters, I'd say.
Well, I think all it was in those, like in the 80s when all that was the rage, I think they were like big, in terms of pages. They were like double the size of the books that I'm writing, and they were quite plot driven, and it was all glitz and glamour. And so I think it was, and the romance was a big chunk of it, but it wasn't necessarily the central conflict. So I don't think they definitely had sex in them, they definitely had love stories in them, but they were all about kind of, making it to the top, or, defeating a rival, or that kind of thing, I think, from what I remember.
Bit Dynasty-esque.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's Dynasty in a book.
Right, or Dynasty, because my American friends hate it when I say Dynasty. They're like, what are you talking about? Okay, and then, leading on from that then, since now we live in a very different world from the Bonkbusters, I always wonder with authors sometimes, do you write with audio in mind now, maybe even if you didn't at the beginning, because the industry's changed quite a lot?
Well, do I? I interestingly, I don't know if I should say this, but I tend to, if I know that, my last 5-8 books have had all the sex scenes from the male point of view. So I suppose I do a little bit, because I know that audio listeners love to hear you and Sebastian, etc., narrate the sex scenes. So you'll be pleased to know they are all written knowing that that's going to please the audio listeners. So I suppose I do in that sense. I also, at the moment, I love Julia Whelan. I don't know if you know her. She's just an amazing narrator who I'm totally got a girl crush on. And I would really like to write an American female in the book that I'm planning at the moment, and my editor and I are fighting about whether or not she should be American or British. So jury's out at the moment, but if she turns out to be American, it's because I want Julia Whelan to narrate her. So that, yes, in that sense, but I don't think on a line by line level I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, and it's interesting because that leads on, because I wondered if it had changed your attitude to writing a little bit, knowing like the sort of vast market of audio and that. But you answered that in that you generally write the sex scenes from the male point of view, because that does appeal in audio more to listeners. But I would say that I didn't, from my reading, you don't seem to write for it to be spoken, in terms of some authors write with a lot of commas. They kind of write in a way that's almost as if you're speaking. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that's a very good way of putting it.
Well, I think probably my earlier work was more like that, and my editor has beaten it out of me. I do not write with commas, and actually it's another thing that my editor and I fight about, is that I just, in the British school system, and in the legals, when you're learning to become a lawyer, you are taught to use commas very sparingly, and and in the US they scatter them about like birdseed. It's everywhere. So I'm definitely comma phobic, as my copy editor will testify to, and I have definitely got less. I'm quite dialogue heavy, but I've got less dialogue than I used to have, I think. So I'm constantly working on my narrative, because I think that's my weakest part of my writing. So that's probably where I spend more time at the moment. I don't know. Does that answer your question? I don't know really what you mean about people writing as they.
Well, I think some of it is what you just touched on, is that some of it's a difference between writing British people writing English and American English.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that across the board in my other work that's non-romance is British authors don't use a lot of commas at all. Like the
No.
sentences are a lot more, they'll run, and I have to put more commas in because of breaths, so I have to
Yeah.
add them in because I don't have like that, my lung capacity isn't what's that famous Olympic swimmer. So I guess some of that is that, but then definitely some authors, I feel, maybe some of the maybe newer ones, or just some that are very geared to audio, write a lot more as if, you know, they kind of are, they are putting the commas in to note where you would sort of speak it, like, yeah,
Interesting.
sure, I know, you know, they kind of do. It's interesting. So different people just have different sometimes different ways of doing it.
And because the Americans have this thing where you always put a comma before a name, like somebody's name, and then you really pause on that. And sometimes I think, I don't really want you to pause on that. So, I don't really want a comma there. But then if I don't put a comma there, my copy editor will put a comma there. So I'm kind of like, so it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because I often think when I'm putting the comma in, I'm thinking, Shane's going to blimmin' pause there. And I almost want to do a note, do not pause. Next time I will, I think.
I'll know now. I'll remember it. But yeah, I think I now also, I have a hybrid sort of English American way of writing, which probably has a lot more sort of commas, or just a different way of doing it. And some things just aren't, they're just technically incorrect here that, you know, I'm taught to do in the UK, and then here it's just bad grammar if I do them. So
and it's so difficult for me because obviously the same version of the book goes to the US as goes to the UK, and so I have to, my grammar is I have a copy editor who is American, and my grammar and spelling is American, as American as I can comfortably make it. But it's not how I grew up punctuating my sentences. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bit awkward for me. And I do it that way because obviously Americans are my biggest readers, but also I find the British are much more used to Americanisms and a bit less, a bit more, you know, they're like, oh, there's a few extra commas, that's fine with us, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's even other books in other genres that sometimes I'm surprised when publishers give me, I know they've given me the British version and we record it for the American market, because a lot of the colloquialisms are still in, you know, the loo and the this and the that, which used to always get taken out. But I've noticed a bit more, or maybe it's just that publisher, like they're happy to just do the full British version, which is very British to me. But I don't know if
and I notice that sometimes, because sometimes I deliberately have an American copy editor for that reason, because she picks it up and says, I don't know what this means, or you'll need to explain this to an American audience. And but I've noticed when I read some British books, they are very British, and I'm like, no American's going to understand what this means. You know, this is like a random tube stop on the, you know, Bakerloo line or something. But but I think maybe it's a bit of a trend that to have these British things that, you know, maybe people enjoy. I don't know. I mean, obviously there are Britishisms throughout my books, but I try and make it so it has context, if you know what I mean. I don't know. Just talking English.
No, it's definitely, I mean, and I've noticed, you know, some people, like, I always change ass, ASS, to arse, because I just can't.
I know.
I can't say it in a British person.
In a British accent.
I wouldn't say ass. Sounds strange.
But some British boys do say ass. They do. That's what the kids are saying these days.
Aging me drastically here.
Exactly. And that's another thing. I can't say boys. Like my editor picked me up must have been Mr. Mayfair, and saying, do British men really call each other boys? And I'm like, yeah, they do. They just, that's and so sometimes you have to, it's a constant battle, I think, between being authentic but not alienating your audience.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yes. I mean, that's my day-to-day life, is I've literally had to drop certain things. Like when I used to drink coffee, I used to drink a mocha, and I just got so much flack for that.
Did you?
Oh, you don't understand that. Like my friends would be like, "Oh my god, mocha!" Like, and then sorry, as a piss take of an American accent, but like, because it's mocha here, and I would just
Is it mocha?
yeah, mocha.
That's
And even in Starbucks in America, I'd get, sorry, what? Like, I would get asked 3 or 4 times. And at the beginning, I insisted on saying mocha. Yes, I'd like a mocha, please, a mocha. And then after the 4th time, I was just like, oh, don't be that asshole who has to hold on to your.
I think you should be that asshole. I quite like that.
I could. There were just some I just had to let go of. I was like, that people don't get it. They don't know what it is, and that's fair enough. I'm in America. Like, I can't expect. It's like, the Brits abroad. Some old school. Like, what do you mean you don't understand? Of course not. But people say Lou a lot now. I feel either they've picked it up from the TV, because a lot of stuff like Fleabag's hugely popular here.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh
I
my
literally,
God, Louise.
I had a kid 10 months ago, and I literally withdrew from the world, basically.
All right, your next reference will just be cartoons, I guess, for the next few years.
Oh God.
That's my brother, anyway. No, Fleabag's is a British sort of thing, TV drama comedy thing. It's on Prime. I don't know what it's on in the UK, but it's on Amazon Prime here. But yeah, stuff like that. I've noticed a lot of British programs have sort of.
And Downton Abbey.
Downton Abbey, of course, because we all talk like that. I take tea every afternoon with Lady.
I would if I could.
Well, listen, I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions and wrap this up.
Okay.
But that just I've noticed with you, and you said it at the beginning of the podcast when you said that your first couple of books, and you said people stuck with you even though you don't think that they're that great. I think you're very hard on yourself, and I was curious as to like how much back and forth do you go through? Is it torturous for you, or have you got to a point to be able to just let it go after,
No, I can't. I mean, it is torturous. I can't say it any other way. I don't. I can. Writing isn't torturous. That is lovely, and I really enjoy it. And it's the editing process that is killer. I have an editor who is a very talented author, Elizabeth Dyer, who just won the Rita for romantic suspense. And she is an attorney, and she's based in the US. And we both are very similar in lots of ways. So we are both really hard on ourselves. And I'm also a real important thing for me is to learn and to progress in whatever I'm doing, really. And one of the reasons that I really didn't enjoy law in the end was because I wasn't learning and I wasn't progressing, because you get to a point where you're just not. And so why I love to learn all the technique of writing, but at the same time it's hard. Doing things not well and trying to improve is difficult. So it is torturous, and I take at least as long to edit a book as I do to write it, and sometimes longer, sometimes not as long, but generally I have to set out the same amount of time to edit as I do to write, which is horrendous. So I'm trying to do a bit more work up front now, but I'm going through the process now of working out what people's motivations are and what the stakes are, and it's hard. It's really hard to get those things right, but when it goes right, it makes the writing a lot easier. And people enjoy the book more, so it's worth investing the time. But I see it as just that, as an investment, but it's hard for sure.
It's hard. Yeah. And you haven't found, as you've gone on, that you, in the editing process, you're just you can let more things go, or not let things go, but do you know what I mean? Like, you've not been so perfectionist, because I used to find myself, I speak sort of to empathize, is that when I was recording over the years, I've kind of learned to just go, no, it's good. Like, it's good. Like, you don't have to kind of beat myself to death about, is that right? Do I like that? Do I not? So
Yeah.
I guess I'm
I
projecting
mean,
onto you my my behaviors and asking you.
yeah, no, I think, well, no, I'm not great at that, to be honest. I'm not great at letting things go. I mean, I accept that no book is going to be perfect, and I accept that I'm not, George Orwell, or, I'm not going for the Man Booker Prize or anything. So it's not that I think I've, doing this disservice to art by not letting it go. It's not like that. It's more that I want to learn, and I don't want to. I don't want to let myself down, really. So I do accept that it's not perfect, and sometimes I think, oh gosh, I really don't know that manuscript as well as I should do. And very often by the end of the first pass, so you go through various passes as you're editing. At the end of the first pass, I'm like, I don't know this book very well. It's just I couldn't tell you what happened when, and which order this happened, and then by the end of it, I'm like, I'm so sick of this book. I want to literally rip it into shreds and puke on it and set it on fire. And then that's when I know I'm done.
So guys, please buy the books that she wants to set on fire and puke on.
No one's going to buy my books now after they've heard that process. They're going to go, oh, dear Clara, that crazy.
That's great, though. It's not I feel like that is the creative process in a nutshell for across the board. I feel, there's sort of, there's the beginning of it, and some projects you feel so immersed in. Others I get like that. I'll prep read it and then I'll go to record. I'm like, who the hell is that? Like, what? And then it's like some just seem to come from somewhere, and then others just take a bit more work. And then once I'm, as much as I enjoy the books, once I'm done, I'm very glad that I'm done.
And do you know that the worst thing, I shouldn't admit this, but the most disheartening thing that can ever happen to you is you press publish, it goes live, and literally 5 hours later you start getting, oh, really enjoyed it, what's next, when's your next release?
Oh wow.
And literally, okay, I want to kill you now, so please step aside. It's that because it's taken so long to get to that point, and it's taken them 5 hours to read it, and you're like, oh my God, I feel completely exhausted and wrung out. And that's what you want. You want a really quick, it feels like a quick read that people love, and that's what I'm aiming for. So that's brilliant, right? But at the same time, it's like it's a bit of a killer on release day.
It's a slight double-edged sword, I guess, is that point. And it does take so much to create it and then put it out there, and then, but it's very flattering, I think, that people are, absorb it and are desperate for
amazing.
anything.
Yeah, it is.
Otherwise
just for like that split second, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, you want to take a break, but you can't. I get it. And then my last question for the day is just, how is it on your end with the writing community? Is it, are you like, are all you authors make you sound like a strange breed, but are you all like, is it a close-knit community? Is everybody sort of like, I have an idea from going to Rare, but I wanted to hear from you, or is it super competitive, or very, camaraderie, or?
Gosh, I think it's like anything in life, it's some and all of those things, so I think generally authors tend to be pretty supportive of each other, but of course we're competitors at the same time. I think that's but I'm very used to that environment, because as lawyers, your colleagues and competitors at the same time. So and I think, I honestly think that I have not really had much to do. It sounds awful, but I've really checked out since having Lenora, and actually now I've got a full-time nanny, and it's a bit more, I'm a bit more back into it, and people are very sweet, and they don't hold it against me that I've ignored them for kind of 10 months or 12 months or whatever. So, but yeah, generally people are really uplifting. They want to see you do well. but they want to do well as well, so it's
Yeah.
kind of, but I think generally, I think authors think it's not a zero-sum game, that you can be successful and the next person can be successful, because like it takes me 3 months, 4 months to write a book, and then someone 5 hours to read it. So there's plenty of that person's going to want to read more than one book every 4 months. So I think you've got to think of these things as being abundant, and not pit each other against each other, which I don't think generally we do, but there's obviously always going to be pockets of that.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, I think that's why I've enjoyed doing this type of work so much, along those lines. Is it's never felt such a case of oh, if you win then I lose. It definitely does seem like there's space for everyone, and if you're good, then I'll sort of support and promote you, while at the same time I'm doing my best to kind of get out there and do really well as well. And I found that less in the acting environment, because
Yeah.
it is a
Well,
case of
because
you win or you lose.
exactly, and that's a zero-sum game, isn't it? You either get the part as Chandler on Friends and make
Yeah.
tens of millions of dollars, or you don't. So,
Yeah, or
yeah.
you're the barista in episode number 10 of season 7. So exactly, it's a strange side, but yeah. Well, I'm glad. It's nice to hear that.
And I think also authors are readers, right? So they get excited about books they've read, and I certainly, I read One Day in December. I mean, I've read literally 3 books in the last year, and One Day in December, My Oxford Year, and I've just read Heist of Hearts by Elizabeth Dyer, and I've loved all 3, luckily. But I rave about them because I love them, and ultimately I'm a reader before I'm a writer.
Right. Yeah, and that was a surprise to me, that a lot of authors, romance authors, would reference to me other writers and other, things they liked, or characters, not just stuff that I'd read, but yeah, it became apparent to me that people were reading everyone else.
Definitely, of course. Everyone's read Ethan Blackstone, so
Oh, good
so
old
I
Ethan.
don't even need to say the name of the book, because everyone knows who that is. To me, it's author or reader. So that's what's great about the community. It's very inclusive. It's like a secret club, because people don't really know it's around. So it's quite sweet.
Yes. Well, it's Barbara Cartland, it's been lovely talking to you.
Fabs. Thank you.
But no,
talking to you too.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Louise, for being the first one on my Shane East Meets.
I'm very, very, very pleased to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. And for those listening, I just want to say that I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Audiobook Lovin Podcast. You can follow us. Please make sure you do on our social media platforms. Also, you can subscribe to the Viviana Enchantress of Books newsletter. And most importantly, obviously, please don't forget to submit your this or that questions for myself. All I'll say is cheers. It's been lovely being here with Louise and with all of you. Thanks very much. Thank you for joining us on Shane East Meets, an Audiobook Lovin Podcast special series brought to you by Viviana Enchantress of Books. For links and more info about today's episode or the Audiobook Lovin series, visit vivianaenchantressofbooks.com. And please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to the podcast if, and I really hope you did, you enjoyed today's episode.